I am super excited and super stoked to have Kim Snyder from the API Guys here again for all of our partners, going through and continuing down the path of learning how to speak CEO part 2. So I am very excited to hear the new information that she has to present. So this is a continuation from our webinar that was done last quarter, and it was the most successful webinar that we did on the Business Booster series. So if you have not had the opportunity to see that, that is available in the Partner Resource Center. But again, I am stoked to have Kim here with us today. So Kim, are you ready for me to hand things over to you?
Jen, I am always ready. You know that.
Woohoo! All
Let's
right,
go.
let me make you our presenter, and then as we are getting things ready, if any of you out there have questions for Kim, which please do have questions, please ask away, and I will get those questions answered by Kim. So you guys know the routine in our question box to ask anything that that you want to know. So Kim, they're all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen, for having me back. It's always a privilege and an honor to speak to my peers by way of the Business Booster webinar, and so I'm really excited to expand a little bit. The truth was there was more than would fit in an hour last time, so we're gonna keep going and just try to give you some more really great information that you can use to make your value blindingly obvious and close more business with less effort. So as Jen said, part 2. So what I'm going to do today, since not everybody who is on this call would have necessarily heard part 1, I'm going to first of all do a very quick recap of part 1. Real quick, not a lot of detail, but just so that you have context for what it is that I'm going to cover in part 2. Then we're going to jump back into how to speak CEO. We're going to pick it up right where we left off, which was in the section called how to make more money and grow your business. So we will continue that section. Today we're going to talk about lifetime value of a customer, LTV. We're going to talk about the business version of compound interest. For many of you know that my background, one of my many past lives, is in the investment business. I own an investment firm in Dallas, and so a lot of these concepts come from that sort of investment framework and how we can apply those to our Infusionsoft businesses. And then the third one is just a total left turn, and it's an idea called mise en place. And before for those of you who don't know what that is, I'm not even going to tell you what the left turn is. I'll wait until I get to it to explain it to you and how on earth it is relevant to what we are doing in building our businesses. And then, of course, as always, my favorite part is the Q&A. And so I'm going to try to leave a lot of time for question and answer at the end. So that's our roadmap for today. With that, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into that recap. So recap of part 1 is this. We really had 2 sections. The first section was ROI, ROI, ROI. And we talked about more than return on investment, but these are all investing terms and how they applied to our businesses. So we talked about and defined opportunity cost. We talked about payback period and how you talk about those things when you're speaking to a prospect or a customer on the phone in order to quantify your value, which is really basically what this entire conversation is about. We talked about return on investment, which is, of course, the most basic building block there is. Return being, let's back it up. Investment being what you spend to get something, return being what you get, in exchange for spending that, whether that be time or money or effort or what have you. So we talked about return on investment, how that plays in. We talked about a concept, really important concept, called risk-adjusted return. So everybody knows about return on investment, but the idea of risk-adjusted return is that all return is not created equal. If you factor in the probability that you will actually get that return. So then that's a different calculation. For example, if I promise you that if you spend $10,000 with me and that will make you 50,000, well, that's basic ROI calculation. But then if we say to two different people, you spend $10,000 with me and there's a 100% probability that you'll make 50,000, versus to someone else I say you spend 10,000 with me and there's a 50-50 shot that you'll make that $50,000. Both of you are going, that's a risk adjusted return. That equation that you probably just did in your head, which can be quantified, you will evaluate those very differently. That's the idea behind risk adjusted return. We also talked about bottlenecks, which is one of my favorite subjects because it's an amazing place to find pain points and to find budgets. So it's sort of consultant heaven, if you will. And the fact that when you find a bottleneck, which is most often the CEO of the company is it in a small business, there should in fact be an almost unlimited budget to resolve that bottleneck, because the cost of resolving the bottleneck can almost never approach what the bottleneck itself is costing, and therefore it's just sort of a quick and easy shortcut for you to find business opportunities within a potential client. So that was the first part. That was the ROI part of what we covered. The second part was about how to make money and grow your business. And we started out by talking about how to establish those baseline numbers for your prospect or customer, because this is all based on numbers, right? That's the sort of thing CFOs, CEOs are going to gravitate towards. I showed you our intake form as well as the project custom development form that prospects submit on our website, and how we start that conversation right at that first step. We talked about how to, in plain English, how do I incorporate some of these concepts into conversations with clients and prospects, and we had a number of them, but I've just pulled out for today for our recap my two favorite, the two that I use the most often. One, you hear me, if you sit on a call with me, you'll hear me say, tell me more about that, tell me more about that, tell me more about that. I do it constantly. Just interrupt, wait, stop, tell me more about that. And then my other favorite question, because everybody says you got to find out what their budget is, and nobody will ever tell you their budget, but this question gets you to the budget, and I ask it all the time, and I've never had anybody not respond to the question. And so I phrase it as, there's some verbiage that goes around it, but it essentially comes down to, is this a $2,000 problem or a $20,000 problem, right? And even if they say, oh, well, gosh, this is not a $20,000 problem, but it is it's more than a $2,000 problem. Oh, really? And then anyway, you keep going, you get the idea. So that's a way to start to get them to talk about the value of the projects that you're talking about. Because, as I said, this whole thing is about quantifying value. Because once you are able to quantify value and start talking to them about the value that you are bringing in these projects, then and only then can you stop trading money for time. And as I mentioned in my last talk, in most cases, trading money for time is one of the worst trades you can make. So that is a quick recap of what we covered in part one. Now, I know that there is a video of this in the Partner Resource Center. We also have a video of part one on our website as well that includes time-stamped notes for the video. So if you'd like to find that on our website, it's bit.ly/speak CEO, all lowercase. So that would get you the video from part one as well as the timestamp notes if you'd rather just skim the notes and review those rather than watching the entire video. Okay, so there's our recap. Let's move on now to part two. So we're going to start with right back where we left off, and I'm going to jump right into lifetime value of a customer. Now, lifetime value of a customer is something that I have found myself talking about in meetings more and more and more recently. Um, and I'll tell you why. So, and then I'll explain what it is and kind of how to calculate it. But I'll tell. It's a great question. So the question is, what is the lifetime value of one of your customers? Now, the interesting thing about this is, I've never had anybody answer this question. In fact, I can't really honestly answer it in my own business. However, it's a really important metric, and even if you don't know the number, here's what happens. People who know what lifetime value really is will have a sense of it, right? I can't give you the exact number, but I can give you a sense of it. People who don't really understand the concept will give you something that's really wrong, but there's a conversation then that starts. And what happens is, first of all, and this is something we talked about a lot in part one, the power frame, right? It elevates you to pure status. Now, rather than talking to them about widgets and gadgets and Infusionsoft and campaigns and this and that, right? You're talking to them at a peer level. You're talking their language. That's really, really important. Second thing it does is it immediately opens the conversation up again in a different way about things that they probably weren't going to tell you if you just asked the question outright. Some people will. Some people are not reticent about discussing their numbers at all, but most kind of find it a little off-putting. This is a really nice way to get into that conversation. It opens up the conversation. What do they charge? What are their revenues? What does their business model look like? Because actually, in order to basically, if they knew the number, if they could say, oh, it's $436.82, they wouldn't have to have this conversation. But because they can't give you that number, they have to sort of, in the conversation, they start to give you the context for what they roughly kind of think it might be, and how they came up with that. And that's how these things start to come out almost immediately. And that starts to give you a sense of things like, how sophisticated is this customer? How successful is this customer? Are they profitable? Are you talking to the right person? All those sorts of things. So it's really good in that regard. And then, but most importantly, here's the thing: that number informs a number of things. It's a really important number. I'm calling someone, or someone's calling me. I hope you guys can't hear that.
You're fine. I didn't hear anything.
Okay, good, because it's like ringing in my phone's ringing in my ear.
No, you're totally good.
Oh, good. I'll just pretend like I can't hear noises in my head. It's a problem I have. No, so this is a really, really important thing to know, because for yourself, for your customers, for any business owner, because what it tells you, among other things, is what you can spend on acquiring a customer. But here's the key thing, and here's why you're asking about this. It tells you or them what they can spend on you, which is, of course, a really, really important piece of the equation, right? So what is the lifetime value of one of your customers? That's the question. Now let's talk about quickly, so that you can talk about it intelligently, what that really means. Now, there are a number of formulas. This is really basic, what I have up here on the screen. There are a number of different ways to calculate lifetime value. And we're not going to get into the complicated formulas, but here's the basic idea. The idea is that it is basically multiplying the average order value. So what does someone spend with you when they, each time that they do business with you? So what's your average order size? How often do they spend money with you? And then how long do they do that? Are they with you for a week, a month, a year, several years, etc.? And again, the math is a little bit more complex than this, but this is the general idea. When you know these basic numbers, you can calculate lifetime value of a customer. So you can see why asking this starts to get to some important questions and important information that you need. Now, let's talk for a second, just so I can give you a kind of an understanding of how this works. Let's talk about Starbucks. So let's think about Starbucks for a second, because almost everybody has been in a Starbucks. And ask yourself this: how can Starbucks afford all of those stores, practically one on every corner, all those comfy couches and nice music and Wi-Fi for their customers, when a customer only spends roughly $6 when they come into Starbucks? I mean, if you think about it in that context, then those expenditures for all of those extra things don't seem to make sense. But here's the thing. Want to take a guess at what the average lifetime value of a Starbucks customer is? The average customer, over the average lifetime, how much do they spend at Starbucks? Well, I won't, since I can't hear you and you can't tell me, right? I'll give you the answer. Believe it or not, an average customer is worth $15,000 to Starbucks. That's what they spend over the lifetime of their relationship to Starbucks. Now, if you understand, as Starbucks does very, very well, that each new customer they acquire is going to, over their lifetime, spend $15,000 with them, then what does that tell them about how much they can spend to acquire that customer? They can spend a fair bit, right? Because it's not the $6 cup of coffee, it's the $15,000 that they're going to spend over time. So think about this in terms of your client or prospect. If they are measuring whether or not to hire you based on the $6 cup of coffee or whatever the equivalent is, I charge $14 for this white paper or what have you, right? Well, it's going to be a lot harder for them to make a case for why they should make these investments if they understand lifetime value. Right? So that's number one of the reasons why you want to understand that, so that, and or maybe they're just not thinking of it in those terms, right? You want to help them think of it in those terms. But so, the basic concept here is that if they don't understand lifetime value of a customer, right? And then they walk away from your call feeling that they learned something from you about their business, or that they could. That's a huge win. I'm not talking about learning something about Infusionsoft, because they expect you to know all of that. The question is, here is more, again, kind of that power frame. Do they feel that you're a peer, that you can teach them or help them as a peer, and then in turn, it's also just, helpful information. So it's sort of a double benefit for you. Okay, so that's the idea of lifetime value of a customer. Now, I did not go through kind of all that big math, but for those of you, by the way, let me just say one other thing about lifetime value. So when I ask about it, a lot, I'm going to say two things. When I ask about lifetime value of a customer, so a lot of times people who are really not that sophisticated, and let's face it, a lot of small business owners are not, okay? Unless they came from a big corporate background, they may or may not be really good at the financial aspects of the business. So a lot of times what they will say is, I charge X for this. And they really are thinking only in terms of one purchase. So you want to immediately be tuned into that. And when you hear that, that's your opportunity to sort of coach them and say, well, right, but does the average customer only buy from you one time? Or are they buying again and again? Or do you have subscriptions? Or, is it possible that if we increase the retention rate, that we can improve your profitability, et cetera, et cetera. So listen for that, because that's where most people are immediately going to go if they don't understand lifetime value. And that's your opportunity to coach them and make them feel like, hey, you're actually a little bit smarter than I am. And you always want to be the smartest person in the room if you can. What was the second thing I was going to say about that? Lifetime value. Oh, heck. All right, I forgot the second thing I was going to say about that. So I'll leave that for now. It'll probably come back to me as soon as I come off the slide. Anyway, okay, so I started to say that, it came to me because it was the turning of the slide that made me think of it in the first place. So here's the second thing. Another thing that I will say to someone when I'm talking about lifetime value, and it's just a kind of a throwaway, but it seems like it's been kind of meaningful, is I will say, by the way, if you were if you had all of your systems on Infusionsoft, you would know what that number was, because we could calculate it, because all of that data would be in Infusionsoft, right? So that's the other way to sort of tie this all together, and that is in fact true. You could, if all of your sales are data is in Infusionsoft, then calculating lifetime value on the fly each time someone makes a purchase or over time is actually not very hard at all. So that was what I was going to say. So let's I did not go through the really sophisticated math. It's not rocket science math, but it's a little bit beyond what we want to dig into here. But that Starbucks case study, there's a really nice infographic that Kissmetrics did on Starbucks showing you how they got to that $15,000 lifetime value, and it's got it has a lot more detail on lifetime customer value. So if you want to find that, you can use the bit.ly link, bit.ly/SBUX, which is their ticker symbol, Starbucks, SBUX -LTV for lifetime value. bit.ly/SBUX-LTV for those people who might be listening rather than watching after the fact. Okay, it's a really good infographic. I encourage you to watch it. All right, so that's lifetime value of a customer. Any questions that y'all have on that I'll be happy to answer in the Q&A section. Or actually, Jen, is there anything that I need to answer now?
So far, so good. So I just want to encourage all of you out there listening, if you have questions, go ahead. Don't save them for the end. Go ahead and type them in now so I can get them organized for the end of our webinar. So continue on.
All righty. Pressing on then. All right, let's talk about the business version of compound interest. All right, so first of all, let's talk about compound interest, so that before you can understand the business version, you probably have to understand the finance version, okay? And if you don't, this is a good lesson anyway. So here's a question for you. Imagine that you have a single dollar, $1. How many times does that dollar have to double to become $1 million? So you have a dollar in your hand, right? How many times does that dollar have to double to become $1 million? So again, I'll give you the answer. It's surprisingly 20 times. $1 doubled 20 times is just over, a little bit over $1 million. Okay? Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at your desk where you're sitting, or if you're in the car, look at your dashboard really quickly. Don't crash, but just take a look at your desk and imagine that the left side of your desk, that far left-hand edge, is $1. And at the far right-hand edge of your desk, and you can't see me, but I've actually got my hands, one on the left, one on the right side of my desk, is $1 million. Okay? Now, let me ask you a few questions. With that kind of visual as reference, after the first double, how much money do you have? Because remember, 20 doubles is going to get you to $1 million. After the first double, you've only got $1, right? So using your desk as reference, after the first 1/20th of the doubles that you need, how far have you moved along your desk? You really basically have not moved at all, unless you have a really, really tiny desk, right? You've gone from $1 to $2. That's it. With that, scale, you have barely moved. How far have you gone after the second double? Okay, well, now you're at $4. The third double, now you're at $8, right? So we're going through our doubles at a pretty big rate, and you'll notice we are not moving very far. Okay, now let's speed the process up. So again, if it takes 20 doubles of $1 to get to $1 million, after 10 doubles, half, after 10 doubles, how much money do you have? Now I'll give you the answer. It's just over $1,000. I think it's 1,024 or something like that. 1,000, yeah, I think that's right. $1,024. Okay, after 10 doubles, half the doubles, and you have moved how far along your desk? Barely at all. Now, speeding up again. After the 19th double out of 20, where are you on your desk? You are now halfway across your desk, right? You're right smack dab in the middle. And it is that last double, the 20th double, that gets you from where? 500,000 to $1 million. That's the idea of compounding. Okay, a compounding means that it's the exponential curve. It starts out going up very, very, very slowly, and then at the end it shoots straight up. It's the exponential curve we've all seen. Now, there's a key to this concept of compounding, which is the reason I do it on the desk for people to understand, is when you're first starting out, it's easy to believe that the effort that you are expending is having no impact because you're barely moving across the desk. But here's the key thing with compounding, as well as what I'm about to talk about, and that is you cannot get to $1 million without that first dollar and that first double, and the second and the third. And if you either fail to make the effort, make the plans, carry out the ideas that are going to get you that first double, that second double, that third double, as so many people often do because they look at it and go, it's small, then you'll never get to that $1 million mark. Okay, so that's kind of the idea behind the financial concept of compound interest. It's when your money that you earn interest on interest, basically. Okay, now, so that's that idea. Let's now move this over to more of a business and growing your business slant, and figure out how does this apply. Well, the idea here is the idea of what I call multiplicative efforts. Okay, multiplicative efforts are the business equivalent of compound interest. Again, they are the activities that, when you do them, will become exponential over time. And the key difficulty with multiplicative efforts is that unless you are really paying attention and thinking in that framework, they just look like everything else. They look like $1, and who cares about $1? No, that dollar is the thing that's going to get you to $1 million. This one key domino, right, in the domino fall, is the one that's going to trip all the other dominoes. And that's the definition of the multiplicative effort. Okay, and so it's of course important in your own businesses, but it is really important in terms for growing your business and demonstrating your value to a prospect or customer in terms of finding those multiplicative efforts that will pay back those huge ROIs in their business, and being able to demonstrate why it is that we want to focus on that rather than something else. Because here's what happens, and I mean this in the nicest way, but so doers will focus on doing what they are asked or told, whereas value creators focus on finding the projects that are multiplicative. So when the client comes to you and says, I want to automate this, whatever, this process in my business, where somebody has to spend 5 minutes once a day updating some date, and they think that's the most important thing on their agenda. If you really want to be at the top of your profession and make the top money, and grow your business and be sought after and be able to take only the business that you want and work only with the clients you want, you start pushing back, right? And asking the questions so that you can find those things that are multiplicative. And you do the exact same in your own business. So I guess the way to sum up multiplicative efforts for me is to say, you need to help your customers understand the math, that compound curve, and charge accordingly. Because that's the other thing. They may be asking you for a multiplicative effort, to work on a multiplicative project, but if they don't see it as such, if they don't recognize that the lifetime value of that dollar is actually $1 million, then you can't charge accordingly. So you do have to help them understand. You have to be able to recognize it. You have to be able to quantify it. You have to help them understand that value and then charge accordingly. Does that make sense to everybody? Hopefully. That's the key to focusing on multiplicative efforts. Okay. Now, with that, deep breath. With that, I want to talk about one more thing. Now, I am about to take a left turn on you here because up until this point, pretty much every concept I have talked about has been a financial concept. And now, rather than speaking CEO, we're going to talk about how to speak, how to speak chef. So I told you it was a left turn, right? Now, obviously, you're not selling Infusionsoft to chefs, so that is not my point. But I do want to help you think about a concept here. And I'm going to use a concept from the kitchen. And that concept is called mise en place. Mise en place. What does that mean? Well, it's a French term, as you may have guessed, and literally it means put in place, to put in place. This is if you're into cooking and cooking school, this is a big deal. It's sort of like the foundational element in culinary school. Its origins comes out of actually military organization, the organization of brigades. And anyway, more information than you wanted to know. But the thing about mise en place is that it is the thing that allows commercial kitchens and restaurants to serve thousands of meals in a 3-hour window with just a couple of guys back there in the kitchen. In other words, mise en place is the thing that makes a kitchen scalable, and which is, for our purposes, a very important concept. Okay, so I was looking at how to explain mise en place, and I saw a quote from a senior at the Culinary Institute of America, and she explains it, because at its, look, at its simplest, mise en place is like just putting things at the right place, on your workstation, etc. That's not what we're talking about. So she says it's a way of concentrating your mind to only focus on the aspects that you need to be working on at that moment, to kind of rid yourself of distractions. That's how she talked about it. But this is such a big deal, just so you know, like chefs, actually, they have it tattooed on their body. In kitchens, like, it's almost like it becomes a religion. It takes on higher meaning, right? So the question is, what does mise en place have to do with making your value blindingly obvious and closing more business with less effort, which is the subtitle of this talk? Well, I'll tell you. Because not only does everything have its place for optimal efficiency, which is the idea in the kitchen, so does every task. Okay? Every task being done in a business has its place, its mise en place. Okay? And for me, I think of it in terms, because I like rules. Rules are binary. They're helpful. I like black and white. So I have kind of this set of rules for mise en place in business, and they are these. So just three. It's really simple, actually. So first, it's if someone or something else can do what you do or you are doing at least 80% as well as you at lesser cost, including lifetime value and opportunity costs, which are concepts we just talked about, one we talked about in part one, because you can never, that was the whole point in part one. Opportunity cost is a big deal, right? And you always have to include it in your calculations. Opportunity cost is saying, okay, well, right now, if I'm writing this email, okay, not only is my value X, but there's the additional opportunity cost of what I could be doing and bringing into the business that's much higher value. That's the variance between the value of what I am doing and what I could be doing instead. Opportunity cost. Okay, so if someone or something else can do what you do or are doing at least 80% as well as you at lesser cost, including lifetime value and opportunity cost, then you should not be doing that thing, and neither should your people. Okay, because this flows, it's not just about you or this is about everybody. Every task, everything in a business has its mise en place, and this is how you figure out where the mise en place is. Okay, so, and the reason I say 80% is because, at least for me, of course, I always, heck, I always think I can do something better than everybody else, right? So as a delegation rule, we have to just be willing to say, look, 80-20 here. If you can do it 80% as well as I can, and you can do it for less than what my cost is, right? I should not be doing that thing. What I should be doing instead is I should be working on my mise, which is the sort of slang for mise en place, my one thing, my thing that only I can do that brings the absolute highest value to the organization. The one thing, right, which is key. Like, we're trying to imagine it as like a big pyramid, okay? And if you start at the top and you find all the tasks that the person at the top of the pyramid should not be doing, and you pare his or her tasks down to the one thing, or that they're what they do that brings highest value, right? Then you push the other things down, and you keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until each thing has found its mise en place, and then you have created a absolutely world-class, well-oiled machine. Now, as with every rule, of course, there is an exception to the rule, and here's my exception. Unless doing that thing gives you such great joy that you're just going to do it anyway. This has nothing to do with the economics of it. It's just what you love to do. It's why you created your business in the first place. Yeah, of course there are other people who could do this better and cheaper than me, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's the one caveat to the business version of mise en place. Okay, so the implications of mise en place are these. Okay, helping your customers and your prospects understand this idea helps them discover that the proper mise en place for many of these tasks is with you, right? So that's kind of key. Because in this day and age, look, I mean, it's interesting. I look back at business, and I wonder at how inefficient we used to be, because all we could do is hire full-time employees, even when we didn't have full-time jobs for them. And that's obviously no longer the case, right? The free agent nation, the freelance world, right? So a lot of those things may not be going down the pyramid. A lot of them should be going sideways, and some of them should be going to you. So here's an example. Let's just imagine that the business owner is creating campaigns for his company. Okay? Now, the first question that you have to get him to understand is, what is an hour of his time worth? Okay? Including all those things, opportunity costs, etc. What is an hour of his time worth? Now let's just imagine conservatively it's $200 an hour, and that's conservative. If he's the business owner and it's a successful business and he's actively involved in the business, then it should be higher than that. But let's just say $200 an hour. Okay. So if you can build those same campaigns for him or her, and presumably you can do it better and faster at, say, $100 an hour, okay, then he's nuts not to be paying you to do those campaigns for him. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense when you just look at the math and take the emotion out of it to be doing something that costs you $200 an hour worse than somebody who can do it for $100 an hour, right? It just doesn't make sense. So one of the things that I think about a lot in terms of marketing messaging, and we all do it, I do it as well, right? What we've been taught is to focus on in our marketing messages on those fuzzy benefits, like, we're going to free you up to do the things you love. And actually, you'll see that kind of thing on our marketing messages a lot too, right? But, every time I think about this, I think, maybe, just maybe, in our marketing, we ought to be focusing a little more on math. Because okay, that's all, well and good if to be able to free your time up to do things you love. And I think, that would be nice. But if someone tells me you are spending $200 an hour to do something I can do better for $100 an hour, when you tell me that, I'm going to say, whoa, well, that's just bad, dumb business, because it's completely illogical. Or if I'm not willing to then turn that over to you, then you, on the other hand, have a different question on your hands, right? And that question is, why is this person wanting to continue to do this task that makes no sense for them to do? And now maybe there's a cash flow issue, but again, there needs to be some education there, depends how fast the payback period is, of course. But the other thing I would say to you is, you want to do business with successful businesses. You do not want to do business with fearful, illogical businesses that live in a poverty mindset. And so if I made this business case to somebody and they said, "Oh, I just can't spend this money right now," then honestly, you have to start questioning, is that a customer that I want? Because I probably don't. Because again, here's the thing, and this is something I say over and over and over again. It's something that I've known for a long time, but once I started to articulate it, I really started to believe in more and more and more and more. And that is that the key to success, for us anyway, is to eliminate, delegate, automate, consolidate, one of those things, key business processes, deep back-end business processes for successful clients. Because all of marketing is either about, this is a little tangent, but I feel really strongly about this. All of marketing is about either the promise of a reward or the avoidance of pain, right? And so when I talk to somebody about, automating their sales and marketing funnel, for example, well, what I'm promising there is reward, a future reward. You can have, more sales. And the problem with that is it's not deeply embedded. In fact, if, so it's based on reward, it's not deeply embedded. In the future, they could just lop it off and just stop doing it, right? There's no barrier to exit, as opposed to if I automate his entire back end business process, the thing that makes his company run, right? The thing that talks to his customers and keeps him from having to hire more staff and all of that. Okay, now what I'm working on is I'm working on the avoidance of pain. And the barrier to exit is really, really high. He can't fire me. He can't fire Infusionsoft. He can't just decide when things, when sales are down a little bit to just stop doing that. Right? And I'm in there, that's why I like it. Barrier to exit is high. And then on top of that, I want to be working with successful businesses, like I said before, that aren't fearful or illogical or from coming from a place of lack or poverty. And so by quantifying all these numbers as best as I can, even just getting a sense of them in these calls tells me, do I say no? Do I literally, which we do? Is this a startup? Forget it. I don't want to do, I don't want to take startups. They're not successful. They may think they're going to be, but I don't know that, right? If you're not successful personally, and as I can't serve all clients, so I have to pick and choose, and that's how I choose. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody, and I know it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I think for us as consultants, and it's a really important concept. Okay, enough of that. So let me keep going. Mise en place. I got way off track from mise en place, but here we go. Let me see if I can get myself back on track real quick. So I talked about this. Let's see here if it'll go to my next slide. Yeah, I'm almost done. Good. So the implications of mise en place, right, are this. And this is what I'm actually just gonna close up on and go to the Q&A. When practiced at its highest level, mise en place says that time is precious, and that resources are precious, space is precious, your self-respect and the respect of others are precious, so use them wisely. And my challenge to you is, how can you apply mise en place to your own business? So Jen, I'm going to close with that and leave a little bit of time for questions if there are any.
Awesome. And I will, hopefully it's not too loud on my end because I have some ruckus over here too. I do have a few questions, and then again, a shout out to the group. This is now your chance, if you've not asked your question, to go ahead and type that into the questions box. But I do have a few questions for you. So one of the ones that came up is going back to like the compounding interest and like the lifetime value aspect of, like, the examples were great, but what if this is a concept that, I guess the best way is, like, I'm scared of it, I'm not comfortable talking about it with the math and everything else. How do I start to become comfortable with this?
Yeah. You know what? I love that question. Thank you for asking that, because you know what? That's probably most people on the call. So here's the thing. You're not going to talk math. And again, that's why I didn't go into the math. You have to understand the concept and really why it's important. But the first thing that you do, right, because like all things, you get comfortable with it by dipping your toe in the water. And gradually, you'll dip it in a little further, a little further, a little further. Do this. Just on your next prospect call, ask the question. That's all you have to do. Just say, do you know the lifetime value of your typical customer? And see what they say, right? See what comes out when they answer that question. And just listen. And then based on what they say, start asking questions. What's my favorite question? I told you earlier. Tell me more about that. Okay? So you don't have to teach, you don't have to, right? But tell me more. Oh, well, we sell subscriptions and they cost $4.56. And so I think my life really, and just start there. And what you'll find is, like I said, the biggest benefit of it is not necessarily the number, because none of them know the number. The biggest benefit is all those other things I said, which is that it opens up the conversation for you to understand a bunch of things. Can they afford you? Are they contemplating a project that is high value? Are they successful? Are they savvy? It makes you appear, it positions you as an expert. Those are the reasons to ask the question, and then over time you'll learn to delve deeper and use it as more and more of a tool. But to begin with, you've just got to ask it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. So good. And then the next question is, if I know my lifetime value, what percent of it should I spend on acquisition?
Okay, so I'm wondering. I would like to talk with whoever is on the call that knows their lifetime knows their lifetime value. But so this is actually not a hard and fast answer either, right? But the rough answer is you can spend you know if you're spending more than the lifetime value of the customer to acquire them, which is often, by the way, the bigger issue, then I'm spending $4 a click on Google AdWords, and the lifetime value of the customer is 6. That's probably not a very good deal. I don't know that there are necessarily any sort of rules of thumb there. But because every business is different. So let me just give you an example, right? So like for my business, we're trying to scale up big and fast, and so we need to retain a lot of our earnings in order to be able to fund that growth. So I may have a very different percentage than somebody who is just wanting to stay kind of flat. They may spend a very different percentage. So I can't actually give you an answer to that. But I think, knowing it and then looking at your numbers gives you a way to at least say, is what I'm spending making sense? Or is it not? And here's the other thing about lifetime value, really more for you than your customers, because I don't think you're going to have this conversation, but you'll see this on that Starbucks case study. Is the other thing about lifetime value is by knowing it, it gives you the levers to tell you how to increase it. So it's not always about acquisition cost, right? So.
Nope, that helps. Thank you. All right, let's see. Next question. All right, so what do you think is the most important ingredient? I'm going to butcher the French pronunciation of the mise en place. Would you focus on the product or your marketing or employee? What's that most important ingredient?
The most important ingredient I think, is the task, the individual tasks. So to me, the tasks that are being done, and you can group them obviously, right? But the tasks that are being done are basically the equivalent of the chef's knife and cutting board and so forth, right? There's a place for each task within an organization. So when I'm thinking about mise en place, that's where I'm looking at. I'm looking at every task, not just within an area. Every task, and is the right person doing this task? That's the question. That's the fundamental question. Yeah.
And so then a follow-up would be, and this is the last question I have, unless anybody else out there has been holding out on me, but the follow-up to that question was, well, if I'm spending a lot of time on menial tasks, but I'm having a hard time outsourcing it or not doing it myself, do you have any thoughts surrounding that?
Yeah, so again, I do it because right. It's the same question as that you're going to ask your prospect, right? And so the first question is why? Why are you having a hard time outsourcing that? Is it because, remember, I gave you the 3 rules, right? The rule was, if someone else can do this task at least 80% as well as you, for less cost than you, then you should not be the one doing it unless it's something that you absolutely love to do. So let's take an example like paying your bills. Okay, so if that could be considered a menial task. There are services that do that for you, right? and I can't call the name of one of them right off the top of my head, but there are services that will do that for you. I mean, obviously a bookkeeper will do it too, but so okay, if that's your menial task, first, like what does it cost you? What's an hour of your time to do that worth every month? How much do you hate it? How much do you love it? And then, if the math says you shouldn't be doing it, then what's keeping you from outsourcing it? I mean, that's my thought is that's the key question right there. You have to ask yourself, I'm a terrible delegator. I have to really force myself to delegate things. I have it if I don't think about it, I will have a tendency to do it myself until I catch myself and go, what are you doing? You have no business doing this. So is it just coming from the fact that you're a control freak, which is that's my problem? Is it because you're scared, to that, the money, you're scared to spend the money? What is it? And then I'd say, you really examine that, because in order to be successful at any level, like I have a journal. I keep a journal every day, and I do the 5-minute journal for any of you who are familiar with that. And and one of the things is daily affirmations. Another thing is what would have made the day go better. And very often my answer is, I would have not wasted that 4 hours trying to figure out this stupid IT problem or whatever, because I can. Right? I would have instantly recognized that this was a time suck, and I would have given it to given it to mise en place, to the right person. So anyway, why? Why is that? And then solve for it that way. That's I guess my best answer. If the math isn't working, then the next question is why. Why doesn't the math work for you?
Love it. That was awesome. That is our it of the questions that we had for today, which is perfect because we're reaching the top of our hour, so it's time to wrap up as it is. So I'm going to actually steal back the presentation from you, if that's okay.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right, so I am going to show you guys my screen again, but I just want to give love and hugs to Kim for spending the hour with us today on just so many valuable nuggets and pieces of information that can really help us succeed. So I am very, very thankful to have you here today. So thank you, Kim, for your time and your expertise, and I know that you are loved out in the community as well for your expertise. So thank you.
Oh, Jen, can I interrupt you real quick?
Absolutely.
Because I actually had one more slide, so can I just give everyone my contact information in case they have follow-up questions or whatever?
Let me go back to you then.
Oh, well, you didn't have to, but okay. All right.
I can do that.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
No, real quick. Come back. Where's my slide? There we go. Here. Okay. There's my contact information, you guys. So if you want to reach out to me, please do. My email address, Kim at the API Guys. My phone number. Give me a call. If you'd like to, I do this a lot, by the way. Anyone who is in our mastery course, knows that a lot of them had made calls with me, and we sat and talked about a lot of this stuff. So feel free, because I love doing this, in case you can't tell. Okay, now officially, Jen, I'm done.
And then I put my contact information up there as well, so if you need to reach Kim via me, feel free to as well, and I can put you in touch with her. But if you guys have any ideas on topics that you want to see, things like this and then some, please let me know. But again, I really, really appreciate your time and your expertise, Kim, and I thank all of you on the line for joining us. So with that, I hope you all have a fantastic week, and then we will see each other soon. Thanks, everyone.